Okay, and we're back. This is for November 5th, 2020. My last prep was done for Monday, and honestly, after that, I took a few days off into the election. I usually wake up extremely early, and I've had the opportunity to hold the position for a few days now. That does not stress me out too much at this point, so I've just been relaxing since Monday, Tuesday. But to go over my last video, I'll start with ZDGE. I discussed in the video and laid out a plan that I like two short scenarios. One that retests the previous day's high of 3.87, and another one that suggests that if we open lower, obviously I don't expect to pop so high, and I would like a short at 3.62. It did exactly that. It popped to that level, and I did not trade it, but this would have been a perfect short. Usually you want to put these, I call them dream entries, and I have a rule of thumb. Usually if it's pre-market, I go for 25% of the expected full size. If it's during the market, I go for 33% of expected size. So in this case, if you're looking to do 10,000 per position, let's say you have 50,000, and this would be between 2,500 and 3,300 short at 3.62 as your dream entry, based on what happened on Wednesday and what happened on Friday evening, basically getting really big wicks on the sell-offs. And it would have been a good cover at 3 or sub 3 with the ads on VWAP break and ads on 325 lower free market break. It's a pretty simple trade. Next one up, I talked about BLRX. That also followed the plan almost to a T. Quote, I said it's a great short at $3 if it gets there. I really like this name for a short, end quote. Again, I preach these dream entries. And so again, just have some in case. Pre-market, 25%, during the market 33% as a starter. Especially if you're not monitoring, never go in too big of a size. But if you take a look at this, it has a lot of selling off all the way here. So this whole situation, basically you have one type of drop and then the moving average kind of converge, and this is a different type of action. So anything above 3, the expectation is that it will sell off faster, just based off how we did it in the past. And so anyone who's looking at this is gonna probably think the same thing. And the idea is you need to make sure your thesis works. You don't have to be right in the sense of being correct in the universe. You just have to be right in the sense that other people think the same thing. And over time, that's where it comes. Anyways, dream short above 3 worked perfectly. Add it on the VWAP break, and respect your, I would cover here 259, which coincides with the previous pop of here, and it kind of that became the new bottom at this point. So yeah, I mean, if you're really risky, you could cover 250s, but always respect the lines that you yourself create. So either way, that's a 40-cent move of something that's pretty risk-free considering the tape and the charts. Next name that I also called out to a T was VHC. I'll say the same thing on Monday. I thought it was a great short because of the rise, and I said that if it pops, I'll be watching it for a short, as this could act out similar to EQ, where a secondary pop isn't high enough, becomes potentially a lower high and fades. So in this case, this was perfect. The short, again, would have happened. It didn't touch the previous support, so the idea is if it jumps above 6.6 and doesn't clear out the next support in pre-market and starts to fade, you join on the bottom trend. So I mean, even if you were slow, you picked it up in 650s. I don't even know what screen I had. Even if you were slow, you picked it up at 650s, you still had a good trade. If you were a little faster, maybe you grabbed it all the way at 7s when you saw that this thing was selling off. The big wicks is what you want to see the most. You can see how it was unlikely that it was going to pass these two sell-off points, as they've put in a lower high essentially. And you close the gap, but sometimes closing the gap is all you can expect, and you should be happy with it. And so longs usually think in that, that's the way they think. So you should think as someone who's holding a long position, where would you want to sell this? If you woke up to some gains and then you see this massive pop in the morning, you're probably going to say, whoa, I need to sell this, and maybe I'll buy back in on the dip. Of course, on the dip, your next breakout points would be watching this high at 643 and watching this low at 621. And then whichever direction it breaks, that's where you add to your short and cover at 5s. So that was pretty easy. The next one was, again, directly from the video, ISIG. I said, quote, I still have this on deck, watching for a potential pump to reshort closer to previous resistances. I do think it was a good short above 1.2, as once again a stick to support resistance lines only, and I wouldn't even short before that. If it breaks 1.2, 1.25, I do like this as a short, so I'll set an alert for it that happens, end quote. So yeah, another perfect pump on Monday. This is actually what I shorted, and I didn't have any more buying power, so I skipped out VHC, BLRX, ZDGE, because to me this was the simplest one. Others had less overhead supply. This one had the most because he had just ran on 1021 and again on 1027. So this was more recent of an overhead supply. People might have bought in 170s, got burned, and I don't know what the average is, but I'm guessing there's people that are well above, maybe like 136 and so on. So you want your overhead supply to be closer. So to me, this was the most risk-free trade out of the four mentioned. All of them would have worked. I just picked one that I thought was the easiest. So at the pop, 7 a.m., I shorted 125. I covered it at 103 because that was my line. It popped here. I did not buy into it because there was no volume to support these moves. It popped back to 130. Again, I actually, I was monitoring this, but even if I hadn't, I would have put in a short at 125 for 1/3 size because it popped all the way here. I was 100% size above 120. And then eventually, I think I covered before the close because the overnight fees were high. I covered exactly at $1 into the close. So that was that. Okay, so for November the 5th, my focus is very much on what I'm swinging short right now. SUP did not actually have locate fees, so there are no overnight fees. I'm seeing crazy sell-off, so super strong support here into another sell-off. So the risk reward is really limited. Anything above 2.28, 2.42 is almost, I think, is impossible to break. And my short was 202. Looking at the smaller time frames, when this popped, I actually shorted into the pre-market and I covered almost all of it on my little beers are exhausted situation, because this thing was correct. Sometimes it's wrong, but I usually reduce my position when I get my indicators to give me some signs. So in this case, this thing was correct and I'm happy I covered almost all of it. I got an indicator, but I didn't really need an indicator. What I was looking for is a steady rise and then clearing out of the supports and breaking down. It obviously didn't break down here. I started a short 188 when this broke down, and then I added to 197 when this broke down. Obviously another pop here and another pop here. I should have added this. I just did not wake up early enough, and I didn't put in a GTC order for my next 227. So again, pre-chained the dream orders and missed out on myself. You know, ideally I was looking for anything above 184 I thought was a good short. Anything above 202 I thought was a great short. And so I maybe put in a little too much buying power into shorting this. And that's why I didn't even care that it popped anymore, because I don't want to put any more buying power into one position. But it's hanging by a thread, and it's doing a little cartoonish bouncing ball situation is the way I look at it. It has a relatively high float compared to how much volume it's trading. It received the last good fundamental news. It crushed ER, and it pushed out shorts, and the stock almost doubled. It's not outside of realm of possibilities, but now looking at the regression line, I do expect standard deviation to play a role in this. I mean, last time it took more than a month for this thing to lose $0.50. Next time it took kind of the same situation. I don't expect it to take as long because this move was faster and this move was faster, and the buildup wasn't as strong, so not as many, but the volume was big. Nonetheless, what I mean to say is the wicks were high. I do expect this to go back in over the next week, maybe 2 weeks, to sub 1.5, and I don't see a point to cover before that. So the next one that I'm watching is APVO. I actually called out a long on this one, and I'm beating myself up slightly that I didn't take it. It had extremely low volume all the way throughout except for this one day, and so it popped on this one day, but I think the pre-market pop equaled that pop, if I'm not wrong. I believe so. Right, or it equaled the bottom of it. So to me, that means pretty much everybody's positive at this point, except for maybe a few people that didn't exit yet, because you've had the opportunity to buy back lower for all the days except for that one single day that it popped. So it gives everybody a nice exit, and I think that's what happened. People exited, and now in this situation, everyone was positive. So my suggested entry was 721, and my risk was 655. But really, the risk wasn't even that high because you could just risk the EMAs at this point, or just go 20 cents below, whatnot. And my thesis was that if it breaks VWAP, that means everyone's positive. If the volume comes in and decides to pop it, it's a really small float. So anything above 5 million in float in general, I'm not looking to short until third day fade hard rule. Anything above under 20 million float, I don't short it until third day is my official unofficial tally. Because even here, I could get the next day I could have got caught in this. Let's say I'm shorting 4 a.m. and I don't cover at 9 because I'm thinking, well, it didn't hit my previous support line. Okay, well, I'm still waiting because I'm still positive. Oh, do I take the small? Okay, what's resistance? And then it just takes me all the way up there. But now I really like it for a short. These lines have drawn up the first day. So the idea was, okay, potentially short of here, but obviously first day, the float rotated, not touching it. So then my next option was, let's see what happens in the morning. I think it's going to pop and after hours in the morning, and maybe it'll go 11:21, 12:09. Again, the volume was too high the next day. You knew the float was already going to rotate in pre-market. It's not worth it. And it would have needed to literally take out this previous resistance, go under, then reject on this for it to be a decent short. Basically put in a lower low, put in a lower high. It didn't do that. If it's trading within the range, I also don't like to touch it. I wanted to test things. Like this was, okay, so it tested the resistance. So clearly I drew the resistance at the correct area. It tested it, but then it didn't test the lower resistance. It just accumulated and broke right through both of them. And you could have known, like, once it breaks through this, the next support resistance is 1814, just looking at the daily. It's so important to get good at drawing these lines to see where the hell resistances are. I usually ignore the wicks and I focus on the bulk of the meat. I look at maybe the biggest volume days out of the few, and that's how I decided on 1822. And I might still be a little bit off, but looking at smaller time frames, pretty close. Oh, and look at this. We have a little sell-off. Wow, with a nice sequence counter. Okay, so that's another reason why I like this as a short now. That's probably my favorite indicator. So at this point, I'm looking for a pop to above 17 or even 18. Put in a weak test, maybe a wick, and look for a sell-off. It's a third-day short from me. I would join the trend in that direction, covering at VWAP, and it rest at 14, and then 12.25 if it goes there and does not accumulate. But I do like it for a short now, and that's the plan. I'm watching MARA and RIOT and NET. I usually like reactionary trades, but all three of those are tied to Bitcoin, and Bitcoin has been popping, so it could be honestly good trades both ways. Specifically NET, it's tough to say. I like it long more if the Bitcoin continues. Yeah, it's up a lot, but also imagine all the shorts that are being stuck here, all the longs that are positive, and if Bitcoin rallies another couple percent, this thing is testing the previous resistance, 55.79. It's slightly above that. So to me, it's actually bullish. It's like it broke the support and now it's becoming resistance. If it consolidates above, I would like to go long. If it breaks down and Bitcoin is stagnant or is going down, then it's a perfect short as well, because he has such a large float, it's not really risky. I'm also watching SRRK. Nothing's changed in that situation. I thought it was a good third-day short, and it paid well. And now it's experiencing, I think, a run-up tied to the market being green for 30 in a row. But if the markets cool off tomorrow, I think it's creating a short as well. I would still use the same daily lines that I respected before, 45.36. If it pops above and puts in a wick, just like this, super big wick, that's a sell-off indicator. So a lower high would be great, and short of that, that's an option. I'm looking at DSKE as well. Also pop or open around this area and maybe stagnate, and I like this for a short as well. I spoke about how it actually delivered really good results, but I think this stock is technically better under Trump for trucking industry, and I don't think it's fitted well for Biden's win, because I think now we're going to be focused more on tech. Also, the chart has a nice little putting in wick situation, so there could be some sell-off going on, and even the large volume wasn't able to break through the past wick sell-offs. So I do like this for a short more than a long. I don't think there's a compelling reason for it to keep going up anymore. And last but not least, I'm looking at APHA. Where is it? Oh no, I see it. Looking for a short with like a spike above 6, maybe even touch previous resistance. Would start 1/3 above 6. It's a high float. Usually when a company acquires another company, they have to pay for it somehow, and in this case it's around 300 million. They don't have enough to pay in cash. Of course they wouldn't. No one does, so they're probably going to issue shares or acquire debt. In either situation, they have a great sell-off chart. They have a potential gap, mini gap, intermediate gap, I don't know how to really call it, to fill to here. I'm just going to focus on identified. There it is. but I don't think there's really any way to get there. This reminds me very much of an MGM chart where it puts in a top, puts in another top, and very similar. They have to issue shares. These guys might have to issue shares as well. Obviously, the market cap is much bigger. They're much better, much better positioned. But to me, this screams over exuberance on the deal. I think this makes sense, and I think this is a short squeeze. They do have a double-digit short squeeze, so that could be it. And to me, I think today would have been the third day short. So, you always look for a pop in short. So here's your pop on a third day. So I'm liking this for a short. Let's see what happens tomorrow. It didn't clear out the previous highs. I'm liking it even more for a short. 611. We're some ways off from that. How far? Pretty far. So if it gets above 6, I like it a lot. So that's my game plan, and I know at least 2 of these will follow my thesis, and I'll be putting in alerts for what I'm expecting for all situations I mentioned. And the idea is, if they don't follow my plan exactly, then I'm not gonna go with it. I'm certain there's gonna be some game time decisions, but the whole point of going over a trade before it happens is to say, okay, this is what's going to happen. And if that's not what's happening, then you may be completely wrong. Just cut it and forget it, and stick to the one that is doing what it's supposed to do. As per my Monday recap, I mean, technically, out of the 4 stocks, 3 of them did exactly what I thought would do. But one of them had the best chart for selling off with the least amount of volume, and it did. I mean, I didn't really have to work that hard. This thing nearly executed itself. I wanted to short at 125 for ISIG, and that's what I got. So in the same situation, if I don't get APHA above 571, I might not short it. But that's fine. I'll look for others. I'll look at DSKE. I'm going to look for APVO, and one of those is going to work. And then maybe later in the day, I'll put in a dream short at $6 and it'll fill. So yeah, we'll see what happens, but preparation makes the day a lot less stressful.